Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you guys know about an opportunity to learn some of the most important skills in life, if not the most important skills. And those are the skills of learning and doing so rapidly, effectively, and easily. You see, guys, I'm putting on a completely free 60-minute webinar that you guys can check out, where I will be going into my absolute best memory tips, learning tips, and speed reading tips so that you can immediately begin applying them and accelerating your learning of anything and everything. All you need to do to claim your spot in this free webinar is visit jle.vi/webinar. We have showings at many different times throughout the days for every time zone, but you have to log in and claim your spot. So that's jle.vi/webinar. And I really look forward to seeing what you guys achieve. This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You guys, one of the only things that every nutritional expert that we've had on the show seems to actually agree on is that we all need to eat more vegetables, eat more greens, eat organic, cut out all the processed junk. Well, who has the time, right? Who has the time to go out, do the shopping, make the salads, make the juices, make the smoothies? And that's what I love so much about Organifi. Their product is an all organic green juice. It has all of the nutrients that you need. It tastes absolutely amazing, and it's made by wonderful people who I consider to be personal friends. And as listeners of this show, you guys can actually save 20% on your first order. And all you have to do is go to Organifi.com. That's ORGANIFI.com and use the coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode, which is lovingly brought to you thanks to a 5-star review from Jay Barshop of the United States of America, who says, "Awesome show, highly recommended. Jonathan and his guests provide some incredibly actionable and compelling content, spotlighting the absolute best tactics to help you grow both personally and professionally. Highly recommend listening and subscribing to the Becoming Superhuman podcast if you want the knowledge and mindsets to become a better business leader and, more importantly, a better overall person." Well, thank you very, very much, Jay Barshop. I really, really appreciate that review. And for those of you who haven't left a review yet, I'm not sure we can be friends anymore. Just kidding. We can be friends, but please leave a review. That would be super duper helpful, and it totally cheers us up. On to today's episode, you guys. Today we are joined by Jeff Emmerson. He is a new author who recently entered the self-help space, and his book is called Overcoming ADHD. Now, you guys know that I've been diagnosed with ADD, or previously informally under the table diagnosed with ADD. We get into that a little bit in the episode, and we talk about this whole culture of diagnosing kids with ADD. Do they all really have ADD to such a large percentage of the population, or is other stuff going on? We talk about Jeff's own personal journey through depression. He gets very personal, which I always appreciate. He shares a lot of really, really hard stuff that he went through, and ultimately talks about some of the things that he is doing and helping others do to manage and overcome this diagnosis, this black mark that so many people carry around. It's a great episode. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. So let me present to you guys my new super friend, Mr. Jeff Emmerson. Mr. Jeff Emmerson, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Jonathan? Thanks for having me.
I'm living the dream. Thanks for joining us.
Excellent.
So, Jeff, I would love to hear for our audience. I try to cover it in the intro, but I always like to hear how people kind of describe their bio. Who are you? What do you do? Share with our audience.
I guess in essence, I am a pretty newly published author. First of all, I signed a book deal. And
congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely a labor of love, as any other authors out there will know. And I'm essentially I guess, a mix between a mental health advocate, speaker, social media person, if you will, and someone who's also very into personal development. Yeah. So self-growth, all that kind of stuff through my own experience. So
awesome. Well, congratulations on joining the industry. I think you got on our radar because you are the author of Beyond ADHD. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Tell me the story behind that journey, and I'll give you a little bit of background. I have ADD, not ADHD, and basically spent the majority of my adult life medicated to get through school. I talk about it a little bit in my TED Talk, but basically all the memory and learning stuff that I do was late in my life, and I wish I'd found it. So I know the struggle, I know the pain. I'd love to hear your story and your background with ADD. Is it something you suffered from, something your kids suffered from?
Actually, I have a little bit of a, I guess, potentially different experience where I do deal with some of the symptoms of it. And I was diagnosed with it actually after a suicide attempt in 2011. But we actually found that, and bear in mind, I'm in North America, so it may be a bit of a different situation here. But through, long story short, after, trying the conventional treatment, which is often just medication, at least in North America here, and thinking to myself, okay, there must be more to this. And I only speak for myself, of course. I began to dig deeper, rather, with specialists from, areas like neuroscience, nutrition, vision therapy, ophthalmology, and others as well. Just trying to think off the top of my head, trauma, PTSD and CPTSD experts, that sort of thing. And we actually, again, though I do deal with symptoms for sure, I basically began to unravel a whole new world of reasons for these symptoms. And I thought to myself, okay, well, we have a better explanation for me because we realized that, again, through dealing, with psychologists and others in vision therapy, again, as mentioned earlier, we found out that I had undiagnosed vision issues and that childhood trauma was a much more likely root cause reason for the symptoms. So while I support everyone across the board, because that's what I'm about, regardless of what your diagnosis ultimately is, I found, Jonathan, that at least in North America, and it frankly, it infuriated me, as much of a positive guy as I am. I was infuriated with how quickly we rush to diagnose ADHD and ADD without digging deeper into a ton of root causes. And we haven't evolved, frankly, to that. We have a long way to go. But I love, and I'm, again, all for, if you have it, whatever the case, focus on your strengths. But yeah, for me, it's a whole bigger approach that we take in the book. So it's my story, my diagnosing journey. I was on 9 medications over 3 years, had a mini stroke not long after, not because of the medications, but just the whole journey there. But also with looking deeper behind the diagnosis and reasons for the symptoms and the increase, everything from education styles to, again, to nutrition, screen time, trauma in the home potentially, or a lot of other things. So as you can imagine, it was a mammoth project to even get this book out to the world.
Sure. I want to ask you, I think what you're saying is really, really important. And, I've started to realize that maybe I didn't need to be medicated. Maybe I needed to be meditated. And maybe it was something to do with lactose sensitivity, which I've only recently realized. And it could be so many other things. As people in the audience probably know, ADD is probably one of the most diagnosed things out there. And Ritalin and Adderall are among the most prescribed and abused drugs in North America, where both you and I grew up. What percentage of people do you think actually have some form of ADD or ADHD versus the amount of people who are misdiagnosed?
Well, bear in mind, too, I'll be the first to say that obviously I'm not a physician. I'm not a psychiatrist I'm not trained. And I'm, again, very transparent about that. But I have, again, worked with top people in the field in North America, from neuroscience to, I just have to say that for anyone who might not know, to the chair of the DSM-4, Dr. Alan Francis, to any clinicians out there, and many others I've worked with in discussing this and digging deeper. And it's Again, I don't know the exact number in essence, but I mean, what Alan Francis will say is he's on the lower side where it's maybe 3 to 4%. I've heard, in North America right now, it's on the way to becoming roughly 15% of boys, for instance. I mean, there's a whole lot more to this and I try to show all sides. I support, for instance, girls who manifest differently with symptoms. There may be a huge underdiagnosis in that population. I would say from everything I've researched, I'm thinking it's on one hand vastly over and misdiagnosed, but on the other also underdiagnosed in a lot of folks. And I certainly do believe this cluster does exist, for the record. That's my opinion. Until we know better, we do realize that their lives are changed, right? Through not just medication, but through other interventions. So I think while I don't know all the answers, I think keeping an open mind to every side of this is huge, and not just, you get some folks, right, that you hear, and I cringe when I hear, well, it doesn't exist at all, or, some other viewpoints, which are, just meditate, as opposed to, It's supposed to be a simple answer, right? And I just try to stay open to every side. So I'm guessing upwards of 10%, maybe 5 to 6%, but I don't just want to throw numbers out like they're the gospel.
Sure. And I can respect that. And anything with psychology is always so many shades of gray. As you were talking, I was thinking to myself, ultimately, does it matter if you actually technically have ADD, or if you have something that looks like ADD because it's, an undiagnosed food sensitive? Does it actually matter in, as you say, overcoming ADD, to know if I have ADD or if I have a short attention span, or if I'm in the wrong doctorate program? I mean, how much does it matter?
Yeah, and I love that. And I have to say, Jonathan, that as I've gone along for the last few years, my viewpoint has certainly changed for those the one or two out there who have happened to follow me for the last few years, perhaps. I was very harsh on the diagnosis at first when I discovered my own likely misdiagnosis. And then, nothing's 100% here, right? Because it's subjective to a large degree. But yeah, you're right. You nailed it. Where I've evolved to at this point is, on one hand, I want parents and teachers and others to know that there are, Jonathan, there are dangers potentially to misdiagnosis and then medicating someone, let's say, because that's
and labeling. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There are pros and cons, right? So I know I've been, if anything, more, I don't want to say harsh, but more questioning of it because of the rampant rates and hearing and seeing how quickly off checklists were diagnosed. So I think we still have to remain aware of that and be careful how quickly we put a label on someone. Again, that can be, due to stigma and everything else, perception in society, that can be like a self-fulfilling thing where someone feels not good enough, or they feel like, well, I know for myself, I've had jobs where, let's say I'm doing a polygraph test years ago for an armored car company, to have a job delivering money to banks and stuff, which was something I was into. I had to mention all that. Or any type of job, let's say, where you're asked about this stuff, and if it comes out, is it going to be held against you? Or do you have a permanent medical record? Or, as may be happening in the US and elsewhere, I'd have to check on that, obviously. But there are concerns, for that. And at the same time, I think that, I love that, some people say, well, whether I have it or not, I'm going to look at myself as whether it's gifted or whether it's focusing on my abilities and not worrying about, having essentially the saying or the statement that maybe I have ADHD, but ADHD doesn't have me. That's another realm, another way to go, or whatever someone's viewpoint, I guess. My point is, focus on strengths and growth mindset, right? And whatever you need to do, that's all that matters. There's no shame in anything like medications or anything else. I feel like, hey, fist raised to anyone out there who's doing whatever they need to do to be their best. That's the bottom line. So yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's like we're splitting hairs, right? But at the same time, I cringe when I think of someone being wrongly diagnosed, or, some of the medications I was on, which were very heavy and I didn't need to be on. I wish there was an easier way.
100%. What was your personal journey out? Because you said, you got tangled up with all different kinds of medications. You had health complications. as you're sitting here with me, you're pretty clearly with me. So what was your journey of getting out of this whole thing?
Well, here was part of and I hope, obviously I'd love for no one else to have to go through this, but I know it's happening. Jonathan, had to eventually, because of some horrible reactions to medications, which are, and I don't want to get too specific and start comparing medications or anything, because that's a big no-no, because we're all different chemistry-wise. But I was on medications for bipolar disorder. I was on everything from lithium to Latuda to others, because I didn't have access, at least in Canada where I am here. We have a shortage of psychiatrists for sure. Even then, I'd be the kind of person who would prefer having a whole team approach, right? Instead of having one person try and diagnose and treat. The body it shouldn't just be on checklists, right? We need to be doing blood testing and other things. But the point being that I was dealing with a family doctor who said to me, and this is just one of several stories from my past. She said, Jeff, we have to experiment. We don't have access to a psychiatrist unless you commit yourself. Literally, that's how big the shortage is. And I'd already done that in 2013. So there's a whole story there. But yeah, these are well-meaning people, professionals, obviously, or they wouldn't get into the field on one hand. But on the other, you can imagine where the frustration and anger grew over several years trying to get to the root of things, and not just be sort of sloughed off, in a hospital waiting room, and actually have time to dig deeper with a team. It just wasn't there. And I even, I was approached by a neuroscientist in Michigan, Dr. Tim Royer is his name, and he saw what I was doing on Twitter. He reached out and said, hey, let me do some further assessment on you, EEG brain scans, audio and visual testing, deeper stuff, digging deeper. And then he essentially came to the conclusion that, Jeff, this isn't what we call classic ADHD at all. I was thinking, okay, this is the reason for all my past troubles. It felt like a huge weight was lifted. At least I had a diagnosis at first. I felt great. Like, oh, okay, now I can explain to people why I've been the way I've been. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not an excuse, but being so determined on one hand and driven, and yet constantly burning out quick. Trying a lot of things and then quitting and other stuff. But anyway, so it's been a whole, from specialist to specialist. Basically, my frustration grew realizing, and then talking with people on Twitter and elsewhere, realizing how quickly it's diagnosed. So to finally answer your question, after a major, almost becoming suicidal again because of being on the wrong medications, again, for mood disorder, bipolar disorder, and my wife witnessing just some horrible mood swings, I decided to, and with doctor supervision, may I add, go off of my medication very cautiously, very slowly. And I just felt this intuitive desire. I was thinking, okay, I've got to take my life back. So as simple as that sounds, or cliche, whatever. So I gradually went off, and I think that was 2014. And then again, about 7 or 8 months later in 2015-ish, again, because I don't remember the dates exactly, I had a TIA or mini stroke. We believe that's completely unrelated, but just the whole, going off medications can be quite, trying as it is. But then dealing with, suddenly I'm trying to talk to my wife and jumbled words are coming out. I have what's called aphasia and that whole other thing there. And anyway, so after all that, and getting all the testing, all the tests turned out negative. I decided to lose 40 pounds because I was quite heavy, start eating better, working out even more. I'm not working out with weights like I was, and just making improvements, because of the mini stroke, obviously. And I haven't looked back, really. So medication free, thriving, realizing I have to say, though, I don't belong in the 9-to-5 world. That'll be a huge thing for a lot of listeners, I'm sure, as well as yourself. I'm guessing as an entrepreneurial type, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's helped me thrive. Even just getting out of the 9-to-5 world and working on my own with my wife has been immense. So,
yeah, I had a friend who used to call, it's often said in the EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, that, we all suffer from the entrepreneur's disease, but everyone else calls it ADD. And I think that's probably true. I think a large portion of entrepreneurs are people who just don't fit into the kind of template of either academia or working for someone else as a salaried employee. I think that's ultimately what ends up driving us, so many of us, to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That was perfectly said. Totally agreed.
So tell me, if there are people out there, Jeff, who are listening and are saying, hey, I'm not sure what's going on with me. I'm not sure if I have ADD, or maybe if they feel they do have ADD, what are some kind of words of compassion and encouragement that you could offer them as to what they should do next? What would be the steps that you would take? And I know they should definitely pick up a copy of the book and read through that as well.
Well, I have to say, yeah. And for me, as much as I get the odd cynic thinking, Jeff just wants to sell books, I would love for them to spend 5 minutes with me and realize that, okay, this is not about books. I mean, books are great, and I'm lucky to have even gotten a book deal, frankly. I got to say, because most publishers just wanted another conventional book from a psychiatrist. And you can hear my disdain when I say that. Almost like the entrepreneur mind trying to fit into the 9-to-5 world, right? That disdain. I'll use that word, I guess, to put it nicely. Right. But yeah, and I get it. I was told that the publishing world is gradually evolving now with mental health. And fortunately, my publisher, Roman Littlefield, I have to give them huge credit. And my agent, Dana Newman, and, key folks who've helped me along the way. Robert Yelling, my co-writer, masterful at it. As far as this goes, I have to say, with all that said, yeah, this book, from what I saw, and we did a comparative check on all the other books out there about ADHD that are similar. And this one, what I love about it is that it actually arms people with the knowledge into what to dig deeper into, and a lot of the reasons why the diagnosis is increasing, like lots of the pieces of the puzzle from, yes, big pharma, to nutrition, to screen time, to, again, there are a lot of other things as well, to society itself. But as far as the words of compassion that I would offer, I would say number one, and again, this is just for me and I'm looking out my window thinking, but number one is it's not the end, no matter what you've dealt with, whether it's addiction, whether it's suicidal feelings like I've had. I've been there. I attempted once. I lost my brother to suicide. I've worked in hospitals actually doing security, guarding, and, but caring for people who were suicidal a year after I attempted, which might sound odd, I know, but I just had so much empathy after that. And moved across the country where they didn't know I had attempted suicide a year earlier. So that's how I got that job, in the interest of honesty. But yeah, I would say, keep going. You have strengths. You have, as cliche as all this sounds, cliches stand the test of time for a reason, I've learned. Do not, as far as what's called self-talk, key terms like self-talk, growth mindset, things that we can research to, if we don't feel like we belong, or, we feel shame and guilt for past mistakes, like myself when I was young, getting in trouble with the law, even having a record, having to prove myself. Again, this overwhelming feeling of lacking self-worth, right? As simple as that sounds. Like, I don't fit in these voices. It's not the end. I say to people on Twitter, a term I use is you've got a foot soldier of support here in me, because I've been there. I've put it all out online, all the mistakes, and I can't go back now. It's all on the line, right? But this gave me new purpose. So for anyone dealing with these symptoms or any other symptoms, or, coexisting diagnoses, whether it's, mood disorders, the bipolar, hypomania, BP2, whatever it is, OCD, to all these, I'll call them labels, but diagnoses, you are just as capable, and I feel like yelling this sometimes because I'm so passionate about it. You're just as capable, even if you've got, areas you need to be wary of. Sure, we all do, myself included. But I guess the biggest thing would be, it's like I want to hug people, because I know that we all have abilities. We all have, hopes, goals, all these things. And it's just a matter of feeling supported along the way, right? And then finding the right strategy, whatever it is. And it's different for everyone. So it's hard for me to have one message, cookie cutter message, right? I would just say, know that you're not alone, as simple as that sounds, because that's what helped me get through as a man when I was suicidal. And men don't always open up, right? Because we have a lot of pride, at least I did. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes opening up is the greatest thing you can do And it, even though it feels like the scariest. So I would just let people know, I'd reiterate that you are not alone in this. And regardless of medications, or if you're in the middle of trying medications and you feel all foggy in your head or whatever it is, people, they belittle you or make you feel less than, that's a lie. And depression, the depression that can happen from the racing thoughts that we know all too well, that can spiral into anxiety, that's depression is telling us lies. And I know it again, I've lived it. And I continue to be gentle on myself as I go. So I know I've offered a whole lot there. I hope, your listeners can take something from that, one or two nuggets.
Absolutely. I want to also ask you, because as you said, you've talked to so many neuroscientists and you've talked to so many researchers. What is your daily or weekly mental and emotional and brain health routine look like? I mean, what do you eat? Are you meditating? What are the things that you're doing to keep your brain, because as you've so generously shared with us, you have a history of suicidal depression. It's clearly in your family. What are the things that you are doing to keep your brain, your mind, and your kind of soul healthy?
Yeah, the critical questions. And a few things come to mind. First of all, and again, everyone's different here. So find what works for you, obviously. And the only way to do that is from learning and trying different things. But I know that for me, I know right off the bat, exercise is huge. And I was always into that. Exercise and creative outlets as well. I'll throw those two out. So for me, my latest thing is swimming. So that's usually 3 times a week for about, an hour and 15 minutes. I just do laps. I'm not getting into numbers too much, obviously, because who cares? But just getting out there and getting active. Everyone's got different goals. But for me, I'll throw it out there. I do roughly 3,000 meters to 3,300 meters for anyone who's into swimming, which for me, I'm 41, so I'm a little older. That's great. Helps keep the weight off. And in conjunction with, I usually eat every roughly 3.5 hours. I enjoy food. I enjoy junk food the odd time for sure. I enjoy, again, I know what works for me, but day in and day out, I've learned to, have an eating plan where it's, some protein, not a high amount of carbs, but some for sure, and some good healthy fats, but not too obsessive for me. Again, that's me. But eating every 3 to 4 hours, I found helps keep the blood sugar regulated so that mood swings are minimized. That's just, again, another key thing that's helped me in conjunction with the exercise. But huge with that as well, another piece of that puzzle, Jonathan, has been just daily reminders. As simple as this is going to sound, getting in the routine of reminding myself, hey, Jeff, don't race. It's not a race. Put in the work, do what you got to do, sort of thing. But it's not a race. Be gentle on yourself. Remember, while everyone has different schedules, and I used to be go, hours and hours a day, like a lot of us are. And you'll hear certain entrepreneurs, I think of Gary Vaynerchuk and some others, right? Obviously.
I can't stand that approach.
Yeah. You know what? I went through that where I found him incredibly motivating on one hand. And, I think he's a great person, all that stuff. We've talked a couple times, but his approach would literally kill me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Gary, I've met as well. And he's so high strung. I think you have to be a one of a kind entrepreneur.
Yeah.
The rest of us, I got to rest.
Well, that's it. And rest is a weapon. Someone once said,
yes.
Rest is a weapon. And if that's one way to look at it, it's just a quote, but an important quote. I think rest is about longevity, right? And I know when I was young, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I was because of, not feeling good about myself and always being very driven and trying to prove myself, I was always in a race to get to some certain goal. Mm-hmm. And as I actually tweeted earlier this morning that, man, I can't tell you how long this took me to learn. And I'm still, I'm learning not to beat myself up for it, which is another huge thing. Self-compassion is a huge thing. But, when we don't achieve things quick, being so driven, and you can burn out and then crash. I don't know if that resonates with anyone out there. Trying to prove yourself. And it's like a cyclical, it's like a pattern, right? Of, I'm not good enough unless I get to X, right. Whether it's, winning a gold medal or just because the Olympics are on or, getting my book published or, only then can I allow myself to feel good about myself and feel happy. I tweeted something about that earlier, and I said I won't make that mistake again of wishing away all sorts of time, wishing away 10 years roughly of moments that I could have enjoyed more with family, friends, and people, waiting for the day when I would achieve a certain goal that I had, which I talk about in the book. And I just think, wow, I mean, but I'm compassionate on myself now, knowing, well, at least I've learned now, right? Better later than never. Always that glass half full approach, even if I feel like crap, even if I'm in the psych ward like I was, or the mental health unit, some would prefer to call it, even if I feel about, an inch tall, that doesn't mean that I can't still honor myself, even if no one else sees me as any good, even if I was in jail, even if whatever the worst case scenario, I'm suicidal, whatever. And I know it's easy to say, it's up to each person to hang on, right? You can't save everyone. My friends will remind me, because sometimes I want to say the perfect thing that will prevent anyone out there who's suicidal or anything else, or, I want to try to save everyone, but then I got to remind myself, well, Jeff, you've got to also be gentle on yourself, because if you burn out, then how much do you have to offer other people? So
I love that. I resonated a lot with a lot of the things you said. And the comparison between being a young man and an old man is my favorite quote when I was 18 years old was Archimedes, give me but a firm place to stand and a long enough lever and I'll move the earth. And I used to focus so much on the lever being skills and money that you can invest into doing big projects and learning more things. And now I realize that the real genius, I mean, of course, that quote was articulating the concept of leverage, which Archimedes, if not discovered, popularized. But I realized that the real genius of that is that the lever is an amazing, wonderful, brilliant invention, both metaphorically and literally. But the real genius is the firm place to stand. The firm place to stand is a healthy family life and a healthy body and a healthy mind and a healthy soul, so that you can then use the lever. Because if you're not standing on firm ground, the lever is just going to sink you and it's going to push you into the mud. And I spent a lot of time just thinking about that. How firm is the ground that I'm standing on?
Wow. I love that. I almost feel like we're in a therapy session from my past and I'm taking wisdom from you. Yeah, that's a huge compliment to you, because wow. Yeah, beautifully said.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you, actually. I hadn't heard that one before, oddly enough, I guess. But yeah, it's so true. And as I think back, really quickly, I'll share this. My wife, Amy, who we met in, late 2008. And my prior longest relationship ever had been about 7 or 8 months. And we've been together since. Anyway, she went through, again, just after my brother had ended his own life, we met about 6 months later. And she's seen me through all of this stuff. And you know what? She paid the bills for quite a while. For instance, she was my solid ground, I guess, in essence, you could say. So, and I let her know that through the book and in real life here, I tell her all the time. But you're right. And my dad and other key people. So I hear you. It's the solid, it's a solid ground, especially for those of us who are very, whatever word you want to use, fill in the blank, driven, we're reaching for the stars or whatever it is, right? We know we don't fit in, or even if we do fit in, we have, big goals and we want to do great things, whatever it is. Sometimes we need that stability as we go out, right? you know what I'm getting at, I'm sure, as we go out. Yeah, it's like having your child go off to school for the first time and you're so afraid. You just want them safe, right? So it's like as you go and reach for the stars, make sure there's that stability somewhere. And I'm fortunate enough to have had that. Yeah. So
yeah,
beautifully said.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Jeff, I know we're running up on time here. I want to ask you, where can people reach out and learn more about everything that you're doing?
Sure. Okay. A few places. If they're on Twitter, I'm definitely on there. That's one avenue, at I am Jeff Emmerson. Yeah. If they just search the words Beyond ADHD, my account should come up as one of them. And also jeffemerson.com. Trying to think of where else. I'm also, for any business related folks, I'm on LinkedIn. And yeah, I guess those are the main channels. Facebook as well, of course.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll link all that stuff up in the blog post for people to check out at superhuman.blog. I wanted to ask you, Jeff, before I let you go, our last question,
Sure.
Which is, if people take away one really big message and you hope that they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that big message to be from today's show?
Wow. I've wondered about that. There are a couple, but I mean, if there was one, I would say to, again, as cliche as it sounds, because I've lived it and I'm proof, I really am. And I have to pinch myself, frankly, that I'm still here and doing this now, what I'm doing. But do not ever give up on yourself, no matter what your age is, because I'm a late bloomer myself, later bloomer. Do not ever stop, even if I can throw in as well, no matter what anyone else, including inside your head, no matter what that voice says, if it's negative or down, it's not the truth unless you believe it. There are ways to change that over time. There are ways to change anything in your life. Again, I always feel like it's cliche, but when you refuse to give up, as close as I came to suicide, I didn't, thank God, and it gave me new purpose. The darkest, I guess I'm throwing this one in if I may, the darkest moments taught me the most, but I had to get through them to see those lessons.
I love that, and I completely agree with you.
And huge love for all of you listening, just keep going. So thank you.
Brilliant. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your time and such a personal story with us. I know people were inspired by it, and I hope anyone out there who needs help is going to seek it and is going to be inspired to keep pushing on because of your words today. So thank you for joining us.
And thank you for listening, for letting me ramble on and pour my heart out. So I appreciate that as well very much. Thank you to everyone.
Let's keep in touch, and congrats and good luck on the book launch. All right, super friends, that is all we have for you today, but I hope you guys really enjoyed the show, and I hope you learned a ton of actionable information, tips, advice that will help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or drop us a quick little note on the Twitter machine at GoSuperhuman. Also, if you have any ideas for anyone out there who you would love to see on the show, we always love to hear your recommendations. You can submit on our website, or you can just drop us an email and let us know. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.